Hello everybody, another album review. Yes, I am on a roll with album reviews. Now, this wasn't on my list of albums to check out, but after seeing a video from Cover Killer Nation, which was like best albums in the first half of 2014 for himself, I saw he had this album on his list, and I was like, I kind of need to check this out if he's checking it out, so in the top below, this is the review of the debut album from the groove/thrash metal supergroup Killer Be Killed, their self-titled debut. Now, Killer Be Killed is a supergroup, a thrash/groove metal supergroup band that formed earlier in the year with Troy Sanders from Mastodon on bass and co-lead vocals. Excuse me. I'm probably not even going to say his last name right, but Dave Elitch, who was the former drummer of the Mars Volta, which is like a really legendary prog rock band in the 90s or something. Greg Puciato, probably destroyed his last name, from the lead vocalist of Dillinger Escape Plan. He's playing guitar and co-lead vocals as Dave Elitch is the drummer. And then finally, you've got probably the most recognizable member of the band because of his legendary status in the world of heavy metal and extreme metal, and that is Max Cavalera of Soulfly, Cavalera Conspiracy, who has an album coming out that I'll be checking out pretty soon, Nailbomb, and most importantly, formerly of Sepultura. All four of these guys came together to make a supergroup project called Killer Be Killed, and they did some early demo stuff and got signed to Nuclear Blast Records, which is amazing for them. And they put out their first album all the way back in May, so it was in that short period of time when they started the band, they got signed, made an album, put it out, and it's shocked the landscape of heavy metal, I gotta tell you. So we kicked off the album with a very great opening track, Wings of Feather and Wax. You can tell with the ideas that this band is going for with the groove/thrash type of vibe. They're going for some brutal songs with some sensibility and speed and heaviness to it. And pretty much on all these tracks, they have an element of that going on throughout every single song on the album. Starting with Wings of Feather and Wax, going down to Face Down, Melting of My Marrow, Snakes of Jehovah, Curb Crusher, Save the Robots, Fire to Your Flag, IED, Dust into Darkness, 12 Labors, and Forbidden Fire. There's always that heavy element going on throughout the entire album. And with the song Face Down and the song Melting of My Marrow, these were two of the longer tracks of the album at 4.5 minutes. That sort of expanded the horizons a little bit. I mean, there was a little bit of a metalcore influence on the album, but not to the extreme extent. But there's just a tiny bit of that in there with some of the guitar tunings on some of the songs. It's tuned like it would be in a metalcore band or a melodic death metal band. But with the purpose of this album being groove and thrash oriented, that's what they were aiming for, and that's what they did with this album. The songs Curb Crusher and Save the Robots were actually two of my favorite tracks on this album because there was that great going back and forth vocals from Greg's vocals to Max to Troy's, and they each have a distinct voice. Max has got the more gruffer, lower, growly voice. Troy has that mixture of a growl and a clean register, while Greg has the clean register and a more higher, screamy vocal. So that's the distinction between each vocalist in the band and each member, is that they have a different register to their voices. So whenever you're hearing the more gruffer stuff, it's coming from Max. When you're hearing the mixture of gruff and clean in the voice together, that's Troy. When you're in the high screamier voices and the more clean vocals, that's coming from Greg. Then towards the end of the album, you would get songs like Dust in the Darkness, 12 Labors, and the closer track, Forbidden Fire. Forbidden Fire being 5.5 minutes. They definitely expanded on that track. There was some soft moments in the beginning and middle and end of the song, but you still have that heavy element to it, where it's still very heavy stuff, but it's like with that song, each member of the band was sort of trading influences off each other. Like, you would hear a little bit of a Mastodon influence. You would hear like a Dillinger influence, a little bit of like a Sepultura influence, and a Mars Volta influence. Like, the Mastodon Mars Volta influences are more in those soundscapes in the beginning, middle, and end, where it's soft and mellow, with a bit of a progressive tinge to it, but it's not a prog song by any stretch of the means. And then, like, the heavy stuff is definitely coming from, say, like Dillinger and Sepultura and any of Max's bands. But overall, with the album, the membership of the band is very, very good. I mean, I've always been a big fan of Troy because I've always been a big fan of Mastodon in general, and Troy's voice is one of a kind, and his bass playing is unbelievable. Greg from Dillinger Escape Plan, he just has a really crazy vocal range with him. He can sing clean, he can sing brutal, he can scream, he can do it all, and that's what he did on the album. Max, with that very awesome low voice, and of course, Greg and Max's guitar rhythms and leads were very well done. Dave's drumming, he was the MVP of the album. His drum work was just off the chart. His double bass playing was awesome. The way he would play was unbelievable. The production on this album was very good. But and the way that on certain tracks, the way they would change their pacing, where 1 minute you're hearing like near death metal because it's getting near blast beat territory, but they didn't do blast beats, at least to my ears. But they would go pretty fast, like thrash fast, and then they would get pretty slow. And of course, the influences they trade off each other, as well as influence from other bands, say like Pantera to an extent. But most importantly, I could hear a little bit of a prong influence on this album because of how it sounded. And to me, it's like this album kind of has a similar tone to two prong albums, the Cleansing album, which I own, and their new album, Ruining Lives. It just has a very similar style to it, but more to an extent, not so much, but just the tones were very similar. But overall, this was a very good album. 8.25 out of 10. This was a really solid release. We may see this album on the Album of the Year list at in December. Who knows? Depends on when these other albums are coming out or better than it. Who knows? What did you guys think of this album? Let me know in the comments. But until next video, peace.